Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is my co-host, Joe Clark, and we're going to be diving into three of the biggest Steelers-related topics of the week. The NFL Draft now 9 days away, at least the first round is, one of the more exciting rounds of the event. Joe, this time of year is always, I guess, packed with rumors and reports and whatever you want to call them, speculations. How are you handling all of those? And we're going to talk about some of these with Shedeur Sanders, but there's a lot of conflicting information out there. How's this time of year treating you?
Yeah, it's always interesting because something will happen on one day and then the next day, they can be completely, it changes in the blink of an eye when it comes to the draft. I mean, I think we saw that as we'll talk with kind of Shedeur Sanders last week. And, just every single day brings something new and it's always changing up until, the Steelers are actually on the clock. So it should be very interesting these next 9 days.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, there tends to be a pecking order or like a hierarchy of reports and the reporters. So, if something comes from an Adam Schefter, you don't take it at 100% face value, but it is Adam Schefter. Nobody's more connected. And then it comes on down to, maybe some other type of people who we do listen about them. We write about them, and it's fun to think about, but you kind of take some of these things with a grain of salt. And so I think there's a lot of that going on with Shedeur Sanders. That's going to be our first topic for the day, talking through a lot of that stuff. There's been a ton over the past week. I think the news of his visit broke pretty much just after our episode aired last week. And so we didn't get to touch on the Shedeur Sanders visit at all, even that it was happening, I don't believe. And so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the rest of the pre-draft visitors, of which we now know all 30 of them. 29 have been completed. There's one left, and we're pretty sure we know who that is based on some reports. And then we're going to wrap up the show with some of Justin Fields' comments that he made last week in I think it was his first or his second press conference or appearance since joining the Jets. He had his introductory one shortly after signing, and I think this was the first one where he kind of took questions. And so he talked a little bit about his time with the Steelers and being benched and all like that. So we're going to talk about all of that. And then we'll wrap things up with a listener question. If you want your question answered on a future episode, that's 412-254-3145. You can call or you can text. We're happy to answer those. Just let us know your name and where you're from. We'd like to get to know some of you guys. And we have some of our regulars, which we love. And we'll be answering a question from a regular today. All right, to the top of the show, Shedeur Sanders. Like I said, he had a visit with the Steelers. That thing was reported last week, just after our show. I believe that ended up happening on, was that Friday that visit happened? It's all kind of blurry. Thursday. And he was the only visit on that day, which typically the Steelers have a few guys in at a time. And I believe, let me just pull up the list here. I think he was the only guy on that day.
It was him and Donovan McMillan, so a local visit.
Oh, local. Yep. So somewhat notable, I guess, that he was more or less alone. I guess McMillan, you do count him, but he's local, so he is basically just coming across the facility there to the other side. But yeah, the visit apparently went well, according to all reports. I think Shedeur Sanders called it a 10 on some of his media appearances after that visit. He compared Mike Tomlin to his father and some of the ways that they approach football and how they talk about football. And so a ton of buzz, and I think rightfully so, about Shedeur Sanders and the Steelers this week. Joe, what do you make of Shedeur Sanders? First of all, the visit, what it says about their interest in first-round quarterbacks, and I guess just how do you feel about Shedeur Sanders overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw the Steelers bringing Jackson Dart earlier for a pre-draft visit, so they're definitely doing their homework on these first-round quarterbacks. So it's definitely not something that can be ruled out by any means for them as a possibility in the first. And I think kind of the news that Sanders is going to could fall in this draft is kind of interesting because when we were at the combine, it was pretty set in stone. It seemed at that time that Sanders was going to go top three, even dating back when we were at the Shrine Bowl. There was a lot of buzz that Sanders was going to go top three, whether it be number two or number three. And then now, kind of as we get closer to the draft, whether it's a smokescreen or not, there's been a lot more of that talk about him falling. And if he does follow the top three, the only two teams that make, I guess three teams if you include the Las Vegas Raiders are number six, but other than that, the only two teams that make sense are the New Orleans Saints at number nine and the Steelers at 21. So it's kind of, it's kind of easy to place Sanders with the Steelers, and then him actually coming in for the visit. I think that kind of tells you that the team, it's something that they would consider. And I think it's good business to have that. I mean, if a quarterback who, if just a few months ago was a projected top three pick, maybe the second best quarterback in the draft is available at number 21, and you have your team like the Steelers where you don't really have any sort of future quarterback plan, you might as well get to know him and consider and see if he's a good fit for the franchise. I mean, it seemed on Sanders' end that he, was intrigued with the idea of playing for the Steelers. And I mean, we had Tom McShay say that Mike Tomlin really liked Sanders, and some reports that said, the Steelers felt the visit went well. So I think it's definitely an interesting possibility and scenario. And I mean, as I mentioned, like, things change with the Derek Carr news. His shoulder injury came out on Friday. So then that could throw a wrench in the plans if the Saints want Sanders at nine. The Giants are hosting Sanders for a workout on Thursday, another private workout. So maybe they could still be considering taking him in the top three. So a lot of factors to still play out, but I do like that the Steelers had him in for the visit, and at least even if it was just a fact finding mission, and that they're figuring out whether he could be a fit for them in the first round.
Yeah, Todd McShay is a guy who's been doing this for a long time, and I believe he said, this time of year, it is kind of, you have to screen things or it's kind of lying season, I think he put it. But he did say that the source that he heard this from, that Mike Tomlin likes Shedeur Sanders a lot, is a source that he is inclined to trust. And so, I mean, obviously anyone who passes along a report is going to be at least relatively inclined to trust that source. But McShay's been around a while, so I tend to, put at least some credence on this. And I think it's reasonable that Mike Tomlin would like Shedeur. I mean, he's a guy who likes pedigree. He's a guy who likes NFL bloodlines. He's a guy who likes winning, being a part of winning cultures. And certainly Shedeur Sanders has done that at Jackson State, at Colorado. He turned two programs that weren't very good into winning programs. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think it makes sense that Tomlin would be interested in him. And I mean, he's practically NFL royalty. I think that probably holds a lot of weight in Mike Tomlin's eyes. He's said it before with guys like really anyone that has NFL bloodlines, but I think I remember him talking about Devin Bush and I don't know, any number of other guys where he just says, well, they've been around it their whole life. And so they kind of have that leg up in terms of what to expect. That moment's not going to be too big for them. And for Shedeur Sanders, the moment isn't going to be too big for him. He's been in how many media things has he already been a part of that most college players would not, have any experience with at this point? He was in a Netflix or a Amazon Prime show. He's been in all kinds of things covering his team kind of very intimately, I guess you could say. So he's used to that kind of media pressure, and so I don't think he's going to shrink in that kind of environment. And so I think all of that stuff would be attractive to Mike Tomlin. Todd McShay also did say that the Giants could be in play at 3, and so the visit or the private workout that they're having with him later this week could make a lot of sense, though they are having one with Tyler Shuck as well. Shuck probably not a first-round guy, so they're just could be doing their due diligence. But all that to say, Sanders, will he fall to 21? You said that there's, the Raiders, a possibility, the Saints. I would throw in, just kind of loosely, the Jets. I would throw in the Colts at 14. I would throw in potentially Seattle at 18. They did sign Darnold, of course, but it's not a long-term situation. Kind of the same logic of why I threw in the Jets with Fields. It's not a long-term situation. But those are kind of all of the teams in my eyes that could feasibly make that pick, especially after what we saw last year with Michael Penix and the Falcons. And, of course, a team could trade above the Steelers. That's above them in the draft order, or even a team like the Giants could trade back into the first round ahead of the Steelers, or a team like the Browns could do the same. They all have much more draft capital than the Steelers do. And so that's definitely something that's within the realm of possibility. Joe, I put Sanders yesterday on my list of top 5 first round draft picks or options that I would like the Steelers to take. I put him at number 2, and I think it stirred up a little bit of controversy in the comment section, which I expected. Where would you rank him if you had to right now? First of all, would you take him if you fell to 21? How seriously would you consider that? And which players would you take him over if they were also available?
I think it's tough because I don't love taking a quarterback in a weak quarterback class, but given that Sanders was kind of one of the top two guys, I think there's some hope that he could be a future starter in this league, and that there's a pretty common thought that he will be. So if he's there at 21 for a Steelers team that, has completely botched their quarterback plan, I don't think it's the same as taking Kenny Pickett when he was the first quarterback off the board at number 20. This is a player that, I'm not going to love the constant, Steelers Sports Center get up talking about Aaron Rodgers and Shedeur Sanders if they sign Aaron Rodgers and the attention he's going to get. But if he was there at 21, I think I would take him and I'd be happy with it. I don't know if I would take him over somebody like Derek Harmon because the Steelers really do need to improve their defensive line. And I think I think if you want to sign Aaron Rodgers, you want to build a team to win this year, you need to put your team on the field that can win this year. And their whole defense line is massive right now. But I would take him over, any of the running back options, and even like an Amari and Hampton. I would probably take him over, Matthew Golden even at receiver, just because having that long-term quarterback plan, at least you have one now, and I don't think you'd expect Sanders to start immediately, and you can get him to develop. So I would, kind of be in favor of that selection if he's there at 21. Even though it's more of a long-term pick, you at least give yourself a quarterback to kind of, plan for the future now. So you're not going into next season, all of a sudden you're in the exact same scenario you were going into last offseason, going into this offseason, where you're resetting at the quarterback position. You kind of have, that established guy in there that at least has spent a year in the room and a year learning from, Arthur Smith and learning under Mike Tomlin, that you can kind of, at least have some stability there. So I would like it. Probably, I'm probably with you, number 2 or number 3 on my list if he is there at 21. Now, I don't think he's going to be there. I actually think the Giants are probably going to wind up taking him at number 3. I just think there's been enough smoke there in the private workout on Thursday. But if he's there, I think I would be pretty happy with that selection.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I am leaning towards Abdul Carter being the pick there at 3, but I could see them taking Sanders. I think a lot of I kind of aggregated several of the top big boards put together by some of the top draft analysts, just as a fun Sunday exercise while it was kind of slow. And let me pull that up here. Shedeur Sanders averaged at 29.8. And so technically, if you're viewing it for taking positional value out of the equation, it would even be a slight reach for the Steelers at 21. And so the Giants at 3, that is kind of a bigger reach. And of course, the Giants are picking only a few picks, later in the second round, once the first round ends there. And there's going to be guys like Shuck around who they're also having that private workout with. There's going to be probably maybe Dart, maybe not Dart. We'll see. Of course, Milrow will probably also be around, though he was invited to attend the draft, which was kind of interesting news. And so I do kind of tend to think he's going to fall past those top 3. Now, what happens there with the Derek Carr news and the Saints, obviously that's a big potential, I guess, barrier to him falling past number 9. If you had to put a percent chance on it, just off the top of your head, that he makes it to 21, what would that be?
Right now, I'd probably go. I think last week I was probably a little more confident on it before the car news, and last week was really when all the smoke was building about him falling. I think right now I'm probably at like 25%. I'm not super confident that he's going to be there at all.
I put it at a 50-50 coin toss right now. I think there is some smoke also about the Saints really liking a guy like Dart. There's been some notable analysts that have even said that they like Dart more than Sanders, and so could we see a surprise where Dart goes before Sanders? It would be surprising, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't be completely shocked or dumbfounded by that pick. There's been, I think, some reasonable takes about Jackson Dart. He's taken about half the sacks that Shedeur Sanders has over the last 2 years. There's questions about Shedeur Sanders bailing out of the pocket, while Jackson Dart has a tendency more to step up in the pocket. That's attractive to teams. So there are some reasons why I could see that happen, and the Saints have certainly spent some time with both guys, but also Dart, and so we can't discount that being a possibility. Now, would the Steelers trade up? I don't think so. They don't have the capital. They'd have to dip into next year's draft capital, which they could. It wouldn't be, I guess, too terribly surprising, especially if they're doing it for a first-round quarterback that they really like, because then you probably don't need the draft capital next year to maneuver up in the first round. If you really like, in theory, if you really like the quarterback this year, what are you angling for in the first round next year? Of course, you want as much draft capital as you can in any given year, but they have these tools at their disposal. Now, they can't trade their comp picks that they're due to get next year until they were made official next offseason, but they can trade their original picks knowing that they're going to have these comp picks to replace them, and so they could. But teams are probably less likely to take deals like that, and they might want more future value than the current value that you could give them instead, and the Steelers really don't have current value to give them. I think if the Steelers wanted to trade up to number 8 with the Panthers GM saying that they'll be waiting, basically saying they're open for business, the Steelers, if you look at the draft value charts, every single one of their picks doesn't equal the value that it would take to move up, 13 spots from 21 to 8. It doesn't add up. The math doesn't add up for them to move up that many spots. And that is giving up every single pick in this year's draft class. Now, those draft value charts aren't a perfect science, especially in a year like this where the second round, third round, fourth round, the talent kind of levels out. But I thought that was an interesting thing. All right, we'll move on to the pre-draft visitors. Shedeur Sanders, I'm sure we will talk about that more next week leading up to the draft. But the pre-draft visitors since our last episode, Amarion Hampton, Ollie Gordon, Derek Harmon, Shedeur Sanders, DJ Giddens, Jared Harrison Hunt, Shamar Stewart, Kyle McCord, Jaden Blue, Justin Wally, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, and as you said, the local prospect, Donovan McMillan, the safety. And so a very, very busy last week for the Steelers. Many of those guys were already reported, but they completed the pre-draft visits on them. And now we basically have our full 30 list. There is one spot left that they haven't actually completed, but we do believe that is going to go to Toledo defensive lineman Darius Alexander, who they showed a lot of interest in at the Senior Bowl, a name that has been linked to the Steelers pretty much the whole offseason since then. So no surprise there. What is surprising, no Kenneth Grant, no Walter Nolan. But they did have in Harmon. Last week we were talking about no first-round defensive lineman. Now that is at least a possibility. But what do you make of Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan? Do you think that they are basically off the board now?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because I thought Grant was a guy that would definitely come in for a pre-draft visit, but he did check the box, whereas Jerry Dulac reported they had a pro day dinner with him at Michigan before they flew back for Aaron Rodgers' visit, and they had a formal meeting with him at the Combine, so I don't think you can completely rule Kenneth Grant out. Nolan's more interesting because Andy Weidel was at his pro day, but Tomlin and Khan weren't at his pro day at Ole Miss. And I mean, whatever smoke there's been that you read and, the Bob McGinn scouting series about some of the character issues. And, there's been reports that he's stormed off the field during practice. And Nolan's fit was always, maybe a little bit less obvious in Pittsburgh's defense. So he's not a guy that I, had penciled super highly for the Steelers' first round pick. And I think it's a lot less likely they would take him than they take Grant. But with the only real first round D lineman they brought in for the pre-draft visit being Derek Harmon, who they didn't have any of the real bigwigs at Oregon's pro day. I think it was just Calvin Fisher was there. So that makes a little bit more sense if the team felt that they got to know Grant well enough in the combine and at, Michigan's pro day. So I wouldn't completely rule him out, but it's definitely interesting he didn't come in. And I think it's, at least to me, seeing these pre-draft visits is kind of, I still think they're going to go defensive line, especially if Harmon's there, but it's kind of really opened up the door to me, kind of thinking about what could happen if they don't take a defensive lineman in the first round. And, some of these guys that if Alexander comes in and then bringing in Jared Harrison Hunt and even, Joshua Farmer, it kind of has made me think, okay, what if they go running back or receiver in the first round, and then round 3 or 4 is a defensive lineman, and then they take another defensive lineman later. Like Harrison Hunt could be, maybe a fourth round pick, and they could take Joshua Farmer in the third, or something like that. Maybe doubling up on defensive line later in the draft instead of taking one in the first, and then maybe doubling up in the fifth or the really late round. So that's just a possibility that I've kind of thought of, and I'm kind of intrigued to see where things go, especially how the board breaks for them, because the lack of quality first round defensive lineman is definitely notable.
Yeah, agreed. Pretty surprising on Kenneth Grant for sure. Walter Nolan, maybe a little less surprising, though I do think he'd be a good fit. I think he's probably going to be well off the board by the time the Steelers are picking. Though you could make an argument for any of those three guys, Harmon, Grant, Nolan. It's potentially all three could be gone, and then what do the Steelers do? And maybe that's why they're hosting more of these kind of third round, fourth round, or even day three, late day three kind of guys. My ideal is that the Steelers end up with a first round defensive lineman, and then they double dip in something like the fifth or sixth round with somebody like a Yaya Black or a Jamari Caldwell. Somebody like that would be ideal for my second kind of double dip player to pair up with. Ideally, I think, in my opinion, Derek Harmon is the best option, but I think that's open for debate. That brings me to my list here. I mentioned it earlier. I had Sanders at number 2. From 5 to 1 in reverse order here, and I'm going to ask you the same question, so think about it while I'm listing these off. I'll give you a second to think. But running back Omarion Hampton I had at 5. Defensive tackle Kenneth Grant at 4. Nick Amenwori at 3, the safety. Shedeur Sanders at 2, and then Derek Harmon, as I said, coming in as the top first-round option. This is just my opinion. These are the guys I would like to see in order of who I think the Steelers should take. Joe, is there anybody not on my list that should be on the list? And if you've had enough time to think, and of course you're on the spot, I had time to think this through and write it out and kind of flesh out my thoughts. So Joe is on the spot here, but take it away.
Yeah, I agree with Harmon at 1. Talked about it earlier. I think I agree with Sanders at 2. Even Warrior I like a lot because he's an athletic freak. You only have one more year left of Elliott. Who knows what you have with Minka Fitzpatrick going forward? The last few years he hasn't carried the splash, but I don't necessarily know if I would have him at 3 because I do like Kenneth Grant a lot. So I'd probably bump Kenneth Grant to 3. One name not on the list that I would probably throw on the list just because he's a player I like a lot and he can play all over the field. Although at this point I don't think he's going to be around at 21 is Jahdae Barron from Texas because he can play in the box, he can play in the slot, he can play outside, he can even give you a few safety reps if you need. And I kind of like that defensive chess piece and the guy that's made a lot of plays during his career. So he's even though the Steelers did a good job addressing corner with Darius Slay, that's only a 1-year deal. And then Brandon Eccles is kind of more of a reserve guy. I think somebody like Barron is maybe a little bit more of a long-term option. Somebody I think he could get on the field immediately. And they did have a formal meeting with him at the combine, but I don't think he'd be the pick. But my personal list, I'd probably put him at 4. And I think I like him in Warrior a lot, so I'm cool with him at 5. There's no other real super intriguing options. Running back, I like Hampton, but I would think getting somebody. With such a deep running back class, I'm okay. I'm more okay waiting on running back, and it's not a super strong safety class, and the Steelers seem to have a lot of interest in it. So, Warrior's definitely a super intriguing prospect. So, I would just bump him from 3 to 5, move Grant to 3, put Barrett at 4. How I would kind of just change that up and what I would prefer.
Nice. Yeah, I don't disagree with some of what you were saying there. Omarion Hampton, to me, is the lone kind of 3-down, big-bodied, Mike Tomlin type of running back that you can get. If you want to wait until later rounds, you can find an Ollie Gordon. I don't love him. Damian Martinez, I do love him. I would be thrilled with that pick, but the Steelers haven't really shown a ton of interest in him seemingly, and so that's why Omarion Hampton, of the backs that they've actually met with, which I think running backs led the way with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total running backs on the list. Caleb Johnson's another one, I guess, that I overlooked here, but of the guys they met with, a lot of them are more kind of speedy. Bajal Tootin, you got Jaden Blue, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, a lot of home run hitter type running backs. And they did meet with a couple kind of bigger all around backs, Omarion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, and of course, Ollie Gordon. So that's kind of my thought process of including Omarion Hampton. But I agree, they've met with so many running backs. They've kind of prepared themselves for any number of possibilities. I see Omarion Hampton as like if no defensive linemen or no quarterbacks are on the board, I think you do go with running back at that point, just because I don't see receiver as really being a first round need. It would be kind of a luxury pick. I think you do take a receiver at some point, but I'm higher on Roman Wilson than most. I think George Pickens is going to be around this year, so you have time to kind of get that Pickens replacement in place for next year. You could even look to next year's draft or go with free agency again, maybe if necessary. So I think running back is kind of that third need after quarterback and defensive line. So that's my reasoning. But Nick Manwari, I think a lot of people look at him as a luxury pick, and you wouldn't even really use him this year. But keep in mind, he played almost 500 snaps of slot corner over the last few years, and he would basically immediately be able to step in and give Beanie Bishop Jr. a run for his money and kind of be a potential year one slot corner option. I think he kind of talked about on one of those interviews with, I don't know if it was on NFL Network or if it was one of those with the Draft Network guys that he talked with, but he said, I can play any position. I can play free safety. I can play box safety. I could play slot corner. He prides himself on that, and he has the snap counts in college to back it up. And so, I mean, we just saw the Bears give, what was it, $40 million over 3 years to
Kyler Gordon.
Yes, Kyler Gordon as a slot corner, and that we already knew it. Slot corner is a very important position in today's game. It's a starting position in today's game, but now there's money to back that up. And the Steelers, what have they had at slot corner since Mike Hilton left? Basically a revolving door. Well, you had 2 years of Arthur Millette, I guess, but they've basically had a revolving door at slot corner. I do like Beanie Bishop Jr., but I think that they could stand to upgrade. Mike Tomlin has even made it seem like, they could stand to upgrade. But right now, they don't really have competition for him. Brandon Eccles played primarily on the outside. This past year, I think he's more of an outside kind of guy. Certainly, Darius Slay is an outside guy. So I think they need competition for Bishop. And Manwari could give you that value in year one with the idea of moving him to safety and kind of being a chess piece like Minkah Fitzpatrick has been at times the following years. So I like that idea a lot. I think the Steelers absolutely need to have good safeties. Minkah Fitzpatrick has covered for a lot of the, I guess, miscommunications and issues on defense over the last few years. It would have probably looked a lot worse if Minkah Fitzpatrick wasn't around. So what does life look like after him? You have Joe Burrow in the division. You have Lamar Jackson. You have all these good quarterbacks in the AFC. You absolutely have to have good safeties. And so feeling that need a year early, I know Alex has been on it pretty much for, I don't know, most of this pre-draft process, but I am fully on board with that, and he was my number 3 pick there. So I think that's all on the pre-draft visitors. I think Darius Alexander will come in tomorrow. That's another intriguing option for probably round 3 at pick 83 is kind of where I would imagine that playing out, though he could go earlier potentially. We will see. The draft invite list did come out. I mentioned that earlier. Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Shamar Stewart, and Matthew Golden are the only Steelers-related prospects in attendance. Most of them had pre-draft visits with the Steelers other than Jalen Milroe, who just had a pro day dinner, and they reportedly have interest in Milroe. And so 4 of their 30 pre-draft visitors going to the actual draft. Now, we don't know who all was invited versus those are just the accepted invites. Of course, Shedeur Sanders is notably missing. I think he had told the media a while back that he wasn't going to go to the draft, and so it's very likely he just declined. I wouldn't read too much into it. The fact that, does this mean he's not going to be a first-round pick? I mean, I've seen people, I think I just saw a report maybe this morning that some teams are confused why Jalen Milroe was invited, and I'm certainly confused why Jalen Milroe is invited because it doesn't seem like he's going to be a first-round pick. But I wouldn't read into that list too much, but it is interesting to note those prospects. Did I miss anything there, Joe?
No.
All right, well, I'll let you take it away. I think you wrote about this Justin Fields situation and some of the comments he made in that first press conference that he held.
Yeah, very interesting. The Jets waited basically a full month for Justin Fields to have his opening press conference, but he was kind of asked about what went down in Pittsburgh, and he was a lot more revealing than I think than definitely than what I expected. So he was asked about getting kind of getting benched last year, and he said it was different for me in a space I wasn't really comfortable. But Coach Tomlin made a decision he thought was best for the team. I'm never going to go against that. I just tried to change my perspective and get better in practice. Um, it's obviously pretty revealing there. Fields, I mean, during the season, he kind of just kept his head down, did what he had to do. He kind of had the role in certain packages in the second half of the season, but pretty interesting for him to openly admit that he wasn't really comfortable with getting benched after going 4-2. But he said it wasn't something that factored into his decision to sign with the Jets. He said you can't take things personal. At the end of the day, I was just excited about what the Jets had going on here. Didn't have anything to do with Pittsburgh, but the opportunity I had here to make an impact. And with the Jets, he reunites with Garrett Wilson, who was his top receiver in college. Aaron Glenn, who is the DC for the Lions, who played against Fields, and he was with the Bears. And Tanner Engstrand's an up and coming offense coordinator, so definitely a good opportunity for him. But kind of interesting to hear that he was on board with the benching, and we heard at the time that Mike Tomlin said he went Lone Ranger with the decision. Maybe some people in the building preferred to keep starting Justin Fields, and initially Tomlin looked like a genius for that move because Russell Wilson started off really strong, but completely collapsed down the stretch. So hindsight's 2020. You wonder, what if the Steelers stuck with Fields? But what could have happened there? Would he still be in Pittsburgh right now? But he's not. He's in New York. He wasn't happy about being benched, seemingly, and the Steelers are waiting on Aaron Rodgers' decision. So, kind of an interesting little takeaway there from Fields' first Jets press conference.
No doubt. Do you buy any of that? Do you buy that he didn't take that into account when signing with the Jets?
I mean, I think it definitely probably had something to do. I mean, it had to be in the back of his mind because we had written that he wanted a clear path to starting. He didn't want to deal with what happened last year. So I think there might have been some trepidation in his mind. I mean, even though the Steelers just signed Mason Rudolph, he's a guy that came in to replace Kenny Pickett. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was a little bit of doubt in his mind that the Steelers could do something and pull the rug out from him again, and that he would not be the full-time starter, even though they might have been telling him he was when they were trying to sign him. So I don't necessarily fully buy that didn't factor in, but uh, it Jets did give him 30 million guaranteed over 2 years. I don't know if the Steelers were necessarily reaching that amount, but maybe they should have been because right now they're not in a pretty spot, especially if Aaron Rodgers opts to continue waiting.
Yeah, I guess it's fair that most prospects are going to have supreme confidence, or most players rather, are going to have supreme confidence in themselves. And so he probably thinks he's going to be successful anywhere he goes because he was on a good trajectory in Pittsburgh. But I always come back to the fact that, hey, you were a 10-win quarterback in your first 3 years. The Steelers basically turned you into this 20 whatever million dollar guaranteed quarterback. And so it's hard for me to kind of grapple with the fact that he would leave for only, maybe a couple extra $1 million or slightly more guarantees. I know money talks, but at the same time, if you have that much confidence in yourself, then money should talk to the point where you think you're going to get this even larger contract the next time around if you stick with the Steelers, who clearly were moving you in the right direction. And so that part is difficult for me to grapple with. And I think, the Steelers apparently went all in on Fields, whatever all in means. I think people have misconstrued what that means. Basically, I think they just essentially matched the Jets' offer, maybe with slightly less guarantees or different guarantee structure. And so, yeah, I think it has the potential to be one of those hindsight things where you're just kind of bummed with it in a year or two from now with Fields if he continues looking good with the Jets, and especially if the Steelers aren't able to find their guy over the next draft or two, or say they sign Aaron Rodgers and it's a flop. I mean, what's a 1 year flop at this point? Just a speed bump, but if they do draft like a Shedeur Sanders and he doesn't pan out, that's when it really starts to hurt if Fields is doing well elsewhere. So it has that potential for sure. I think that wraps up that topic. I think he gave us more than we were expecting. Kenny Pickett mostly has just given nothing since leaving. He just says, that's all in the past. I want to move on, and just kind of talks about his current situation. So it was interesting to get Fields' comments there. But we're going to move on to our voicemail question. This one from Brett in San Angelo, Texas.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo. My question / comment is about the different perception of players who missed a year secondary to injury. We see that Roman Wilson, the discussion seems to be, we don't have any idea what he is and not sure if we can expect anything out of him, etc. While people talk about Fautano as if that's an absolute given, and in fact, everybody seems to be worried more about the other side. So I find that just interesting, because the reality is that Wilson actually saw some regular season snaps. He got to practice at the end of the year, and he was healthy at the end of the year. All things Fautano did not. And while Fautano is first round pick, Roman Wilson's a top 100 guy. So it's not like there isn't draft pedigree for both. The big difference is that Wilson will be playing a familiar position, whereas Fautano will be playing a position he hasn't played since high school. And if Wilson does fail, there are other people to pick up the slack. If Fautano fails, there's literally nothing else. Love to hear your thoughts and see what you think of that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question, Brett. As always, if you want to have your question answered on a future episode, that's 412-254-3145. That is also in the show description. If I spoke a little too fast there for you, you can also text that if you don't want to have your voice on the show. That is totally understandable. On to Brett's question. I think I'm going to answer the last part first, which is saying, or just really answering your comment there, that after Fautanu, there's nothing. Yes, I agree. That's a big concern. And really, after Broderick or Fautanu, if either of them get hurt or fail miserably, it's going to be a rough season for whoever's the quarterback, and probably a rough season for the offense at times. I think we spoke about this last week in terms of the free agent needs that could still happen. There aren't a ton of names out there on the tackle market, but I think that there could be another veteran addition, maybe at roster cutdowns after training camp. Maybe if somebody becomes available, the Steelers have done that in the past where they scoop up a tackle. I think Dylan Cook is an option. He doesn't have a ton of starting experience, but I think he's been on the roster long enough. He knows what's going on. He has probably a good amount of cohesion with some of those other guys, just working with them in practice a bunch. But yeah, we definitely share that concern with you, Brett. The first part of your question, why is Roman viewed differently than Fautanu, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I just think you look at kind of an undersized receiver coming in. We thought, his role is going to probably be on the slot. He gets hurt, and Calvin Austin plays well in the slot. So it's not necessarily like we don't know what we're going to get out of him. It's more, I don't necessarily know how much of a role I think there's going to be for him this year, because I don't think he's going to, surpass Austin in the slot. They could split snaps. And I think when I kind of look at it, is you kind of have a comparison with Calvin Austin, who missed his rookie year. Roman Wilson played 5 snaps in week 6, and he didn't have, a huge role in his second season. So I think we're kind of looking at Wilson will kind of ease back into things this year. Whereas, going back a ways, David DeCastro missed a lot of his rookie season, came back and made an impact in year 2. Fautanu, got a ton of college reps. Even though he is switching to the right side, he did play the right side last training camp. He played 55 snaps at right tackle in week 2 against the Broncos and looked pretty good. Got hurt in practice the week after. So I think there's a little bit more that we saw out of Fautanu to be confident that he can, step in and be a key contributor and be a solid starter. And he obviously has a very clearly defined role, whereas Roman Wilson's role is not as clearly defined, and even so, receivers kind of sometimes, especially these mid-round receivers, will take a little bit longer to develop than a first-round offensive tackle does.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question overall, Brett, but Fautanu's a guy that they were basically ready to start, and they were starting. Roman Wilson missed all of training camp pretty much, other than the unpadded practices, and so at least Fautanu missed some of camp and preseason and stuff as well, but at least Fautanu got a good amount of training camp to work and all like that. Now, Roman Wilson, I think before the pads came on, he was like the top receiver statistically. I know Alex does the training camp stats, and I think he was the top or the second top receiver statistically in terms of receiving yards and a couple other categories. He was the second receiver on that list. And so I think there is hope for Roman Wilson. And so I don't necessarily get why people are so down on Wilson is more what I'm getting from this question. Fautanu, I think the team seemed comfortable. All the reports were that the team seemed very high on him. And so I think that's why kind of the attitude is carried over into this year. My question is, why is everybody so down on Roman Wilson? I think he could be a huge part of this offense this upcoming year, even though he wasn't in year one. So hope that answers your question, Brett. We hope you do give us a call back. As always, that is everything for the show today. I'm Ross McCorkle. That is Joe Clark. You can follow us on Twitter at Ross_McCorkle and at JClark1233. It's going to be a busy week ahead, guys. The draft is in 9 days. We have a ton of content coming from you. All of our mock drafts, our final predictive mock drafts will be posting. We have a schedule where one of our contributors each day is going to be posting one, so we're going to have a ton of those for you guys to sink your teeth into. We hope you follow along all of our draft coverage, and we hope that you've enjoyed all of it so far. That's all for this week, and we will catch you guys next time.